I wanted to talk to you because you were really one of the first Republicans on Saturday in the aftermath of the shooting of Alex Pretti to say that we needed a tactical pause. What what motivated you to send that message out?
You know, you could just tell that the climate and the sense of anxiety and frustration here in Minnesota and the Twin Cities had just been building. And then when I saw that tragic event unfold on whatever video I happened to watch, I just knew that we needed a moment to stop, to pause, to reset, and rethink what was going on and how it was being conducted. You know, I'm a military guy and first responder by trade, and I just kind of asked myself, what would I do in this situation? I know in the military what we would do is we would do a tactical pause. We'd gather ourselves, ask ourselves what's working, reassess, rethink some leadership, and say, hey, what can we do to be more effective and make sure that we're actually accomplishing the mission we set out to do?
The shooting this weekend, I think, was an inflection point, a turning point, where people had, there. Did you have questions about the tactics and some of the things that we were all seeing on video before it got to this point on Saturday?
You know, any time that there's a shooting, everyone has questions. And when I watched the video, without getting into detail too much, they never sit well with you. But that, of course, certainly didn't sit well with me. And I just knew, based on what I'd seen, how things had played out, that things had gotten to a point where nothing good is going to come of the same methods. If we just keep doing what we're doing, it's clearly not working the way we would like it to. And quite frankly, that's not safe for everybody. Whether you're someone on the street observing or demonstrating, or you're a law enforcement official trying to carry out your duty and your mission, those circumstances, they just continue to set people up for failure in an unsafe environment. And we've got to do what we can as leaders to prevent that, to rethink what we're doing so that we're doing operations in a way that's much more safe for everybody.
State Senator Zach Duckworth is with us. You're in the Army National Guard. Were you called up or deployed this weekend at all?
I have been activated with the Guard. I'm working shifts, so I'm off shifts right now. Really throwing off my sleep schedule, but I have been helping out here and there. Yeah.
It was pretty moving, I think, to see the National Guard like handing out coffee and donuts to protesters this weekend. Talk about that.
Yeah, we're just like anybody else. We're fans of coffee and donuts, and we just, I certainly don't speak for the Guard in this capacity. I have to say that, but I've been doing it for over 20 years. The last thing that we like to do is be the face of anything, but we're here when needed, and it's our job when we're called upon to support local civil authorities, to uphold constitutional rights, and to really just provide safety and support to law enforcement if needed. We take our jobs very seriously. We're proud professionals. We're proud to be of Minnesota. We're proud of the Twin Cities. And if we're called upon to help, we're going to do it. And that means taking care of our neighbors as well.
So the tough part of this, I think, is that Republicans who support Donald Trump, and I'll tell you, on Saturday, I said much the same thing you did. I said that, we've gotten to a point where it needs to stop. Like, we can debate what the best way to enforce immigration laws. We can sort things out later. We can figure out a strategy. But we are harming Minnesota by having this surge of officers, which is a choice. Surging ICE agents is a choice. And so you can choose to pull it back in. And I will say, I get a lot of pushback from Republicans who say, look, so you're in favor of letting rapists run the streets? You're in favor of not enforcing the laws? Like, how do you respond to that? Because I assume you got some of that pushback too.
Yeah, how I respond is, I think it may not be universal, but it's pretty near universal that most folks, regardless of your political ideology, do support, apprehending people who are not in our country legally, who are violent criminals and have just a terrible rap sheet. Most people say, yeah, let's obtain those folks and send them back so that they're not here and causing issues within our country or within our state. That's a pretty widely agreed upon issue. What a lot of people don't agree with is kind of haphazardly just apprehending anybody and everybody and then kind of figuring out things later. That's not good professional law enforcement, and there's a better way to do it. And what I would say to my friends who may share a desire to see immigration law enforced is that part of being in that position of having federal authority in really any law enforcement capacity, whether it's state, local, or federal, is exercising restraint. That's the professional thing. That's what we're called upon to do. We're held to a higher standard. And restraint doesn't mean wanton enforcement of whatever you think you would like to do. It means targeting those who are worthy of going after, and then making sure you're minimizing any sort of collateral damage in the process. If your tactics are obviously inflaming the situation, then you need to rethink those tactics, because we want to be effective. We want to keep people safe while accomplishing the mission and not be counterproductive. And I think that's why you're maybe seeing some changes at the federal level now to sort of rethink leadership and ensure that we're going to utilize tactics that people agree with, are comfortable with, and are safe.
Greg Bovino and Kristi Noem both were outspoken, painting a Minnesotan as a would-be mass killer of police officers. There is zero evidence to support that. What do you say to these two people for what they said?
I'll be very frank with you. It's wrong. That's kind of one of the things that put me over the top. The immediate characterization of that gentleman as some sort of a domestic terrorist, someone who was there to cause mass casualties or target law enforcement, was obviously not the case, in my opinion. Wasn't true. There wasn't even a shred of evidence to suggest that. Sure, lawful firearm carrier, I get that. But that's a pretty big leap to go from somebody who's lawfully carrying a firearm that they never brandished to saying that there's some sort of a domestic terrorist. And that's wrong. We got to be honest with the public. We have to be honest with people about what we're encountering. Things don't always go the way that we'd like them to when we're conducting law enforcement operations, but that doesn't absolve us from having to abide by the truth and being honest with the public. In situations like this, we have to take painstaking measures to ensure we're as transparent and honest as possible if we have any hope of keeping the trust of the public from now and into the future.
The White House, the president, Donald Trump, and the governor, Tim Walz, finally talked today. Finally. I think this should have happened months ago. But the fact that they talked today, those two seem to have toned down the rhetoric. I'm not sure that the press secretary over the midday in her news conference, she again blamed Democrats for everything that's happening in Minnesota. But what does it give you hope that they had a conversation?
It does. I think, unfortunately, in today's day and age, it seems that, politicians or folks on either side of the aisle spend a lot of time talking at each other, not to or with each other. And that's what we need more of. That's how we find solutions. That's how we find common ground and find a way forward. And I'm hopeful that's what's happening now. I think, there's been a pretty, common sense, reasonable request maybe for some more cooperation at the state and local level with these federal agencies. I can understand why they might be hesitant to, but if we can get some sort of collaboration, some sort of working together from the federal to the state and local level, it's going to make the situation a whole lot better for the people of Minnesota. It's going to help us accomplish that common sense mission that we're trying to, and really keep us all that much safer.
Should the state of Minnesota, as we talk with State Senator Zach Duckworth, a Republican from the South Metro, should the state hand over the voter rolls? That it seems to be, which I got to say, it seems awful distasteful after a couple of weeks of immigration enforcement to now say oh, well, we'll get out of there if you give us the voter rolls. But I guess, what do you say about that?
I would say, for me personally, I wouldn't try to conflate the two issues. I'd keep them singular. Let's focus on immigration law and enforcement. And then if the federal government has thoughts or questions or requests regarding elections and voting here in the state, let's discuss that matter in that lane as well. I think conflating the two confuses people, makes it seem that much more political, when in reality, we're trying to depoliticize the entire situation and kind of get back to a calm and to a peaceful scenario. Can we do some improvements regarding elections in the state? Sure. I'm sure we can make improvements in every state across the country regarding elections, but let's not conflate the two and over politicize the issue.
Any indication to you that we are going to get a pause, or what's your gut tell you on this?
My gut would tell me that I think we're seeing the pause right now. I think the president making some leadership changes, bringing somebody else in to head up operations who I think has a track record of being a little bit more mindful in how these things are carried out. I think I read that the Border Patrol gentleman is headed out of state tomorrow. I think we're going to see some changes to how things are conducted. I think you're going to see people purposely try to build more relationships with local law enforcement officials to, have a little bit more coordination and support while this is being conducted here in our state. And I think that'll go a long way to moving us in the right direction. Is it going to please everybody? Absolutely not. But will it take down the temperature and make things safer? Hopefully.
Yeah. That's what I think is like all of these issues are valid issues to be talked about, but you can't talk about it when every day you've got ICE agents, and some ICE agents I'm sure are doing, well, I know a lot of ICE agents are doing the sort of behind the scenes work of serving, warrants and I-9 requests at companies all over Minnesota. I'm sure you've heard from plenty of companies in your district that have had those visits. So lots of other stuff is happening, but the public stuff of like stopping people on the street, grabbing people out of cars, asking people based on their skin color or their accent this isn't my America. Is it yours?
I'll give you an example. Within my district, there was a woman who works as a lunch lady in one of our local schools who was apprehended, detained, and left her 4 kids behind to sort of figure out what they were going to do in the meantime. Thankfully, I think she'll be released back to her kids shortly. But she certainly wasn't somebody that I think should be a priority number one on the radar of folks to detain and apprehend. Especially somebody who has been cooperating with immigration and trying to find a path to be here permanently in a lawful manner. And so if we can refocus on the people that should be the target of these operations, I think that will really calm the waters and instill some confidence in folks and help us return to a sense of normalcy.
Well, the texters are cheering you on. They like the level-headed. Your guest sounds very reasonable. A huge thank you to Senator Duckworth. So can this dude run for governor?
You're going to get me in trouble now.
Well, Chris Maddle dropped out today saying that he can't rectify running as a Republican in a party where the national leaders are so willing to use retribution, use immigration agents as retribution against Minnesota. How do you react to that?
It can be tough sometimes depending upon the issue, especially when it's local. And I will say, I've noticed when government agencies and departments are issuing statements that also have pretty blatant political undertones or language in them, it just doesn't seem appropriate. It's not fitting. If your officials or politicians want to make those statements or use those words, that's one thing. But when you have kind of incendiary statements being made or having be the official statement of a certain department or agency, it just doesn't set the right tone and doesn't feel right as a citizen when you say, well, wait a minute, that department, that agency is supposed to be on the side of all Americans, of all citizens, looking out for the best interests of all of us. That seems highly political. Let's leave that to those in elected office if they choose to be that political and keep our agencies and departments neutral.
Yeah. I like the boring news releases that bureaucrats used to send out. That's a little better. Zach Duckworth, really appreciate the time. Thanks for spending it with us today.
Thank you, sir. Stay warm.
We'll do our best, right?